Hi, I'm Ashley Bevan, and today we're checking out Historic Boulder's main event of the year. It is such a cool thing to experience. This is all about the historical figures in Boulder and the surrounding area. It's about their lives and what they did to create the Boulder that we know and love today. Let's go check it out.
I was born in 1848 in Ohio, just right on the Ohio-Kentucky border. And I was one of 8 Yates boys. I had 7 brothers. And we all decided to leave Ohio and come out here to Colorado in the 1870s and 1880s and make our fortune in gold right on the hills above Boulder. Now, I wasn't a very good miner, and I didn't do so well at mining. And I had a wife, Loretta, and 4 children with 5 on the way, and it was tough going as far as maintaining a household. One of my friends suggested that I might consider running for election to Boulder County Sheriff. This is 1882. In Boulder in 1882, I had just finished building a brand new courthouse on Pearl Street. And in that courthouse, they built an apartment for the sheriff. And so one of the perks of the job, if you got elected sheriff, is you got a free place to live, which sounded like a pretty good idea to me. It sure beat mining. So I was going to run for sheriff of Boulder County. I can tell you from personal experience, when you run for election, sometimes you don't always win. But in 1882, I did win, and I was elected sheriff of Boulder County, and I became sheriff. And my brothers who were out here were all miners. Now let me tell you about 2 of my brothers. My brother John was a fine, fine gentleman. He was small and short, handsome, and hard worker. My other brother, Bob, he was the youngest in the family, the youngest of the 8 boys. He's another story. He had a quick temper. He was a big, massive guy, and would get in fights all the time, over 6 feet tall. And he had another bad habit, which was when somebody had something he liked, he just took possession of it. And at some point in time, the state of Colorado caught up to him. They suggested that he might spend 2 years at the state penitentiary down in Canyon City for grand larceny. And he did that. And after Bob finished his stint as sheriff, as a prisoner down there, he came back. I was still sheriff here, and he came back up, and he didn't have any place to live, and I wasn't going to put him up. I was a sheriff, and he was a prisoner, convict. But my brother John, being the nice guy he was, said, "You can come live with me, Bob." So Bob moved in with John. Now, they were both miners up in the hills. Right around then, they discovered gold in an area up in the hills, right behind us, up 4 Mile Canyon, called, the area was called Copper Rock. Now, there was no town up there, but looks like there was a lot of gold, and so they built a town very, very quickly, as they did mining towns. And they built the 3 most important buildings you need in a mining town. They built a general store, a tavern, which was called Beale's Saloon, and a brothel. And it was close enough to Boulder where they could actually train back and forth. They had ran a train line from Boulder up to Copper Rock. And so the miners could live down here in Boulder. My brothers Bob and John did. They could train up in the morning. They could work in the mine. They got off at 4 o'clock. And being miners, of course, they didn't immediately go back home to their wives and children after work. They stopped in and had a whiskey or 2 at Beale's Tavern. One day at home, John noticed that his fine pocket watch was missing. And immediately suspected his brother, Bob, who had a reputation for thieving. So that day after work, that afternoon, when they're having their afternoon whiskey after work, in front of all the miners, John accused Bob of stealing his pocket watch. Now, Bob was a big guy, and he had quick temper, and he immediately started beating on John. And John tried to defend himself the best he could. And they got to brawling, and John was 35, and Bob was only 22, and Bob was a big guy, and John was going to lose this fight. And John started fearing for his life. So at some point in the fight, John pulled out a hunting knife with a 5-inch blade, and he thrust it into the heart of his brother Bob. Bob fell to the floor, the barroom floor, immediately bled out there in Beale's Saloon, and died. Well, the miners all gathered up the body, and they put it on the train. They put John in handcuffs, and they put him on the train. They brought him down here to Boulder. Now, Copper Rock, right up the hill, is in Boulder County. And this being the county seat, they decided they would have a trial here in Boulder. Now, the trial for murder was held in the mortuary. The mortuary was Trees Mortuary, which is at the corner of 11th and Pearl. And that building still exists today, in 2024. After it was a mortuary, it became Tom's Tavern. And now it's the Salt Restaurant. Same building. But in 1892, it was a mortuary. And so they put the body there on a slab in the mortuary. They had my brother John in handcuffs on the other side of the mortuary. In the middle, they sat the jury. They swore in a jury of 6 men. Back in those years, only men could be on the jury. And they had the trial. Now, in 1892, justice was swift. The stabbing occurred on a Thursday, May 26, 1892. The trial happened the very next day, Friday. And at the end of the day, all the evidence had been submitted. And the 6 men in the jury were hung. They couldn't decide. They could not come to a unanimous decision. Half of them felt that my brother John should be held accountable for murder. The other half of them felt that he was justified. It was self-defense. As the sheriff, I stepped in and I sat down with the six men in the jury and said, "Gentlemen, I have a proposition for you. If my brother John, the defendant, promises to leave town and never ever come back, could you see fit to acquit him?" And they said, "We think that's a really good idea." So John left town, and last I heard he was out in California. My brother Bob, of course, was dead. And so they buried him here at Columbia Cemetery, and if you go down the far end of the cemetery, you'll see a very nice gravestone that says Robert Yates, and he's buried there 1892 is the date of death. I myself lived another 30 years after this 1892 incident, and I died in 1920. And if you look behind me, there in the shadow of this small tree, you'll see my gravestone. Joe Yates on the left and my lovely wife Loretta on the right. You'll also notice that our children spared no expense in erecting the most elaborate edifices in the entire cemetery. They imported fine concrete from far away in Longmont, and they had an artisan skilled at engraving who spent many, many days etching our names and our dates of life on those gravestones. And I'm proud of the 2 gravestones, which are the finest here in Columbia Cemetery, memorializing me, Joe Yates, as the sheriff of Boulder County. Thank you so much for listening to my story.
Thank you.